What's up YouTube, this is Dennis Panuta for tutorialsEU. In this video we're going to add a bunch more to the game. So in the first part we had the UI and the grappling system. Now we are going to add the combo system. We're going to display points once we run through something. As you see here, we'll have combos, then we will auto-generate the world, meaning we will auto-generate those hooks. So we're going to build this game as you can see here, and it will be all yours. You can go ahead and make of it what you want, and you can go ahead and extend it. I hope you enjoy this, and if you do, please leave a like and also consider to subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to add a bunch more cool stuff related to Unity in the near future. All right, so let's get started. All right, so if we look at our game at a current state, we have the problem that we cannot make sure that our camera is following the player. So the camera is fixed at a specific position, and that's what I want to change next. So let's get started with that. Therefore, we are going to create a new script, and I'm going to create a C# script, which I'm going to call camera controller. So camera controller is the script, and let's get started with the camera controller here. So you can see we have the start and update methods directly, and what we are going to need is, first of all, the instance of the camera controller. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Static camera controller instance, because I only want to have one instance of the camera. So this makes sure that we don't have multiple cameras, which would create a weird situation. Okay, so I only want to have one camera, and it should be the one that is currently active. Okay, so then we need some more variables. So for example, the camera itself, which is our main camera, which I'm going to call my camera. Then I need to be able to change the orthographic for the zoom in and out effect. So what is this orthographic? It's this size here. So you see projection, orthographic. We had the option of using perspective, but we chose orthographic, and I want to be able to change the size here. So currently the size is at 5, but if we put that at 3, that's how it's going to look like. So basically we can play around with the size here. So with those two variables here. Okay, then I want to have a range of the speed of my camera. So my camera should be able to follow with a certain speed, and I want to set a range between 1 and 10, because I don't want my camera to be super duper fast. It should have a speed between 1 and 10. And then we need to have a boolean which takes care of storing whether the target is followed by the camera or not, and the target will be our player. So of course we will need to have a target. So let's add that here. Who does the camera follow? Well, it follows a transform, and I'm going to call this one target. In our case, it's going to be the player cube. So it just follows the player. That's the idea behind this whole script pretty much, right? So what is it transform? Well, as you know, every single game object has a transform component. So it's this transform here, which means that it will give us the position, the rotation, and the scale for the object that we are currently following. So in our case, it will be the player. Okay, you can see each of those objects has a transform component. And then we need to get the rigid body of the target so that we know how fast it is. Okay, so I'm going to calculate the speed and use that into the zoom effect, because here we had the zoom in and out effect. So basically I want to make sure that depending on the speed of the player, I'm going to either zoom out if he's super fast or zoom in if he's really slow. Okay, so that's basically what I want to use this rigid body 2D target rigid body variable for. And then I want to get some distance from the target, and therefore I get the vector 3 padding. So that's basically the distance of our camera to the target, which means to the player. Okay, next I'm going to implement the wake method. So private void awake, which is called once as soon as the script is created. Okay. So what I want to do in here is I just want to make sure that the instance is set to this, and this makes sure that we only have one camera. Okay, we don't have multiple ones, we only have one camera controller. I don't want to have multiple cameras, and that's what I do with this. Okay, and then in the start method, I'm going to set two variables. First of all, our target rigid body needs to be target.getComponent, and there it needs to get the rigid body 2D component. Okay, so that's what I do with this. I get the actual component of my player. Okay, so if we move scenes here, we look at the game scene here, our player has a rigid body 2D, this one here, and that's what I get there. Quick pause. So I built this complete Unity masterclass course in which you're going to learn how to build real games and how to build them from scratch. So you're going to learn how to build a platformer game, how to build a Space Invaders clone, how to build a Fruit Ninjas clone and optimize it for mobile and export it for mobile as well, how to build a first-person shooter game, and finally how to build a tycoon game similar to Adventurist, which is an endless game. So if you want to become a real game developer, definitely check out the course. You can find the link in the description and you will get the course with a huge discount. So don't hesitate, as you will not only get the course, but you will also get it in a structured manner with all of the code, as well as a Q&A section with a 5-star support. So get the course now. I hope to see you there. And then I need to set the variable isFollow. So isFollow, I'm going to set that to true. And now, as I said, our goal is for the camera to follow the player. But for this to not look weird and not have a stupid appearance and just not look good, we want to use Lerp. Lerp will allow us to interpolate between two values and 2 points in the room. So basically this will allow us to make sure that the camera is moving smoothly. Okay, so this is what we're going to use. We're going to use Lerp, which takes a vector 3a and a vector 3b, and then also a float as the third value. And t is the interpolant. It's clamped to the range between 1 and 0 or 0 and 1. This is most commonly used to find a point some fraction of the way along a line between two endpoints. So e.g. to move an object gradually between those points. Okay, we want to move gradually and not abruptly. And that's exactly what we use Lerp for. So let's go back to our project, and here I'm not going to do that in the update method, which we could expect would be a good point, but we're going to do it in the fixed update method. Okay, private void, actually let's make it a little quicker so you can see what's going on. So fixed update, we're going to do it in fixed update. First of all, we check, are we following the object? And if we are, then let's go ahead, change the position of our own transform, which means let's change the position of our camera itself. So this transform position is the position parameters of our camera. So of the object that holds this controller, which is, or the script, which is our camera. Okay, our camera holds this camera controller script. So vector3.lerp, so we interpolate between two values. First of all, we take the position of the camera itself, and then we take the position of our target. But we also add a little bit of padding, because we don't want to be exactly where our target is, but with a little bit of distance to the target so that we can still see it correctly. Okay, so the camera shouldn't be inside of the player, but a little bit away so it can still see the player correctly from a distance instead of being inside of the player. And then this is the t, and t is the speed. So basically we say, okay, the time, the delta time, which means the time since the last time that this function was called, since the fixed update function was called. For example, if you fixed it to 30 frames, this will be called 30 times per second. So this means that this will be 0.033 seconds. So this delta time here, times the speed that we have created, which is basically this variable that we have set up here, right? Which is in a range between 1 and 10. And then we multiply that with the distance between our camera and the target itself. All right, and this is just to calculate the position of our camera. Now the thing is, I want to also change the orthographic size of the camera. Okay, so here I'm going to use the late update method. So let me add that in here. The late update method is called after the fact. So we have fixed update, which is called, let's say 30 times per second. If we have fixed our frames to 30 seconds, or maybe 60 times per second if it's set to 60. So usually you would have 60 frames per second. You use update for user input because you want this to be as quick as possible. So you don't want to wait for the next frame to be loaded, but you want to react directly. So that's what we have the update method for. And then we have late update, which is called after the update method has been called, after everything has been calculated. And that is great for the camera because it doesn't want to have the position of the player before it is moving, but after it has moved. Okay, so we're checking again, are we following? And if we are, then let's change the orthographic size of our camera. What is our camera? Well, it's our camera object. So it's the actual camera that is assigned to the script. And here we use the Lerp method once again. So we have one value, which is the size that we have right now. Then we clamp the other value, where we use clamp and remap to get the we remap based on the target rigid body, velocity, magnitude, 0 to 100, the minimum size and the max size. And we clamp that with the minimum size and the max size. And then finally we pass the third parameter, which is our delta time times speed. So the last update was called times the speed. So once again, what does clamp do? Well, it clamps the given value between the given minimum float and the maximum float values, returns the given value if it is within the min and max range. So you pass in a value, you give it the minimum and maximum value, and then it just looks, is this inside of the minimum and maximum value? So let's say you pass in 5 and the minimum value is 1 and the maximum value is 10, then it will return 5. If you pass in 30, then it's not within the range, so it will not return it. It will not return 30, but it will return the maximum value because 30 is bigger than 10, so it's just going to take 10. If it's less than 1, which is the minimum value, then it will just return 1. So that's what this statement here says. And now, of course, you might wonder what this remap does. Well, remap is, of course, the function that we used before in our player controller. So inside of our player controller, we use this method remap, and it's over here. Okay, so basically this remap function, I know it's not perfect practice to copy and paste methods, but we're just going to do it here for simplicity reasons. Of course, we could make this public and then access it from this class via our target, but what if the target changes? Then we would have a new problem. So basically what remap does is it allows us to change the size of the player based on speed. Okay, so that's what this remap method will do for us. Okay, based on the speed of our player, it will then go ahead and change the size of the player, and it will be a size between those values. So from 0 to 200, from min size to max size. Okay, so that's what this one will do for us. All right, and now there's one little error that I had. I by accident wrote rigid body here instead of rigid body, and it should be with a small b. Okay, once that is done, we can go back to our Unity and we can add our camera controller to our camera handler. So click on the camera handler. So just drag the script right in here. Okay, so it will be another component. Okay, and then we need to assign a camera, and that will be my camera. I'm going to drag it in there, the main camera here. Then the size, we can set that size to, for example, 10. So minimum size will be 10, maximum size, let's say 25. The speed should be something like 5. You can play around with that. The target should be the player parent transform, so the player parent position, so wherever the player currently is. And then I'm going to add a little padding here of 1.6, 4, and -10. These are just values that I came up with. You can play around with this value, of course, as well. All right, now let's run it. Let's see how this is going. And you can see our player is getting thinner when it's faster, and also the camera is following the player, but it's smooth, even though here it's following quite well, but it doesn't look stupid in a way. All right, so that's pretty much it. All right, now let's go ahead and add a game over condition, because we need to have a point where the game is over, right? And that point would be either when we touch the lava or when we are out of lives. Currently, we don't have the concept of lives implemented yet, but we can start with the lava. So let's go ahead and create a new sprite here. Create, and here we go to sprites. I'm just going to create a little square, which I'm going to call white, or actually I'm just going to call it lava. Okay, so this will be my lava, and here I'm going to create a new 2D object, which is going to be a sprite, and I'm going to call this one lava. All right, and now we can go to this lava, we can reset its position, and then we can drag our lava sprite into the sprites here. Okay, so now the position will be inside of our player as far as I can feel. So let's put it further down. You can see there it is. Okay, now this lava should of course be significantly larger. So I want it to be super wide and a little higher as well. Now, of course, we need to reposition it to, let's say, -34. So this way it will still be visible here when we start the game, but it's just at the bottom of the game. So this is where our lava should then in the end be. All right, now let's go to our materials and go ahead and create a new material here. And I'm going to call this one lava material. And now let's go ahead and change that to sprite. And here default. Okay, now we can go ahead and play around with the color. So for example, I'm going to use 255 here, 81 and 0. So it will be this orange color. All right, and now we can go over to our tags, and that will be here. So we add a new tag and we make sure that we have the tag lava in here as well. Okay, so tag lava, save that. And now let's make sure that we assign that to our lava here. So let's assign the tag lava to it. And let's drag the lava material to this material here. Okay, so it will be this orange material here. Now let's go ahead and add a new hook here. So actually, I'm just going to copy and paste the hook from before, and I'm going to call this one enemy hook. And then let's select the enemy hook as a tag for this hook, as well as here the layer. It should be a hook, right? So it should behave like a hook, but at the same time, it should be an enemy hook. And let's move it around a little bit, because where it is, it's not at a good spot. We also need to make sure that it has a different appearance, so it has a different color. So let's change the material, or let's create an enemy hook material. So I'm going to go over to material and enemy hook material. Now this enemy hook material should also be of type sprite default. And here we're just going to use red as the color. Okay, so a very aggressive red, and that's what I'm going to assign to the enemy hook. Now we have this red hook here, so that will be our enemy hook example. Now, of course, don't forget to save your scene. And we can go over to our script now, to our player controller, and add a little function here. Okay, I'm just going to add it towards the bottom and going to go over what's going on here. Okay, so here I have this function called hit hook, or this method, and it needs to know the position of the hook that it hit. So it's going to check, is the tag hook? Then we're just going to say normal hook hit. And if the tag is enemy hook, then we're going to debug life decreased. The problem with this is that we never know whether we hit something. So the player currently doesn't know whether he hit any object or not. And that's what we are going to change now. So let's go ahead and create a new script here. So I'm going to add it to the player body. I'm going to give him a new component here, which will be a new script. And I'm going to call this one player hook trigger. Now you could, of course, add the code to the player controller itself as well. That would be fine, but I'm just going to create a new script for that. Okay, now let's go ahead and open up this script. And here we're just going to have an on trigger enter. So here on trigger, well, it doesn't help me. I'm just going to paste the code in here and walk over it. So basically what this on trigger enter method does is it gives us the collider that we touched. Okay, so what is the collider that we hit? And then we check this collider. We just see, okay, is this C, which is this 2D collider? Is this a game object which has the layer mask named to layer called hook? Okay, so this is basically how you can get the hook layer. And we see, is it the hook that we hit? If it's a hook, then we call this function called hit hook. And we pass in the current collider and the position of the current collider. Okay, because if we look at our player controller, that's what this hit hook expected. It needs a transform. So we're going to pass it a transform. And then if we hit the lava, we're just going to say player died, game over. Okay, so now let's make sure that we have an instance in our player controller so that we can even use it. So here at the very top, I'm going to add public static player controller instance. And now, of course, we need to set that at one point. So I'm just going to do that in the awake method. So I'm going to say private void awake, and instance is going to be this. So that we have this player controller as the instance. And now we can go ahead and use this instance here. And did I give it a capital I? No, I didn't. Well, now I did. So if I save it, now this error should disappear. Okay, at this point, we need to make sure that the player has a player tag here as well. So I cannot see it. There it is. Okay, player tag. And of course, the player layer should be here. So for our player parent, our player body has the player hook trigger. That's good. Now our lava object needs to have something that we can collide with, because currently it's just an image, right? It doesn't collide with anything. So we need to add a collider here. So I'm going to add a box collider 2D. And I'm going to say that it is a trigger, because it's only going to call this is trigger or on trigger method if the thing that we collide with is an actual trigger. And by the way, of course, I get this error because I needed to make sure that this is an instance called instance as the same as the variable that we created there. So that is just our lava. Now we need to do the same thing for our hooks. So here we need to make sure that our hooks now are in fact hooks. Okay, so I'm gonna add a hook here for every single one of them. That's why it's good that we don't create thousands of them manually, but we will do that programmatically later on. And we need to make sure that they have box colliders, which they have, but they also need to be triggers. So every single hook should be a trigger now. Is trigger, is trigger, is trigger. Now with the enemy hook there, I will also make sure that it is a trigger. And then of course there's one more thing before we can test that, and that is that the tag names are exactly the same. So in my code here, I had the C tag called lava with a uncapitalized L, but it should be a capital L because that's the name of the tag that we gave it, right? So it really depends on what you gave the lava as a name. So here you have to be super careful with the right naming. Okay, so if we check that out, we click on the lava itself here, we can see that it was a capital L as all of the other tags. All right, now let's save the scene and let's test our game and see if we can actually see anything in our console. Well, you can see I tested it already and we can see something in the console. So here, normal hook hit, bam, and player died is displayed. Okay, so if I now look at the console, you can see normal hook hit, and so forth. And then we have this player died here as well once we hit the lava. Okay, so now we have our game over condition, or in general, now we have our collision detection. We don't have anything for the enemy hooks yet, but we're going to add that later on. And first of all, we are going to see how we can add the camera shake effect. All right, now let's go ahead and make our camera shake. So I want to enable a little shake on my camera once I hit, for example, the lava, or once I hit one of those hooks with the player and so forth. And in order to do that, we can go to our camera controller, and here I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to call this one shake force, and it's a float, which is going to be 5 at the beginning. And then I will need to add a little method here. I'm going to get rid of the update method. We're not using it right now. And this one will be a private I enumerator. So we're going to return an I enumerator, and I'm going to call this one I shake. And basically we need I enumerators for routines. So if we want to use coroutines, we need to return an I enumerator. Okay, let's see how that actually works. It will make a lot more sense once we get into the meat of it. Okay, so in here I'm going to paste a bit of a variable triad. So you can see we have an offset, which will basically be the shake force times 0.1. Then we have the maximum value, which is our float, which is currently an offset, our offset, the minimum value, which will be the offset minus 0.1, and the duration, which is going to be 0.25. Then we have the float t, which is the time of the shaking mechanism. This is, by the way, the duration of the shaking, of course. And we get the new position each time, because we need to know the new position of the camera each time, because the camera is changing its position, and this creates the shake effect. So we're moving the camera very quickly, and this generates this weird effect, or this shaking effect, so to speak. Okay, and we get the main camera transform for changing positions while shaking. So we just say, okay, transform cam, we get the camera's position. So this gives us the position of the camera. Okay, now let's go ahead and set the angle of our camera to 0. How can we do that? Well, we just say the transform cam, which is the position of our current camera, and the rotation and everything, pretty much this whole part here. Let's click on the camera. You can see here position, rotation, and scale. We're gonna set that to 0. Okay, so we go here, we say at least we want to set the angles to 0. Okay, so the angles specifically are these parts here, rotation. So let's say I set that to 45, 45, 45. So this is me changing the rotation. But if I set that to 0, well, all of those values are back to 0 and back to normal. Okay, so that's what this line does here. It returns them to 0. And then I'm gonna slow the time a little bit. So I'm gonna slow down time, which means this will be slow motion. So I'm slowing down the time by 50%, and I let my project wait a little bit, my game wait for 1 second. But the important thing is I'm using yield return here and wait for seconds real time. So I'm saying, okay, don't wait for a specific frame amount to run or anything like that. Just wait for 0.1 seconds. And the cool thing is here, because we are using an I enumerator, we can use yield return instead of the normal return. And at the same time, we can now pause the game without pausing the game, so to speak. So we pause this particular feature, but we don't make our whole game freeze or anything like that. Because otherwise, you could, of course, use something like sleep for 1000 milliseconds, which would be, for example, 1 second. Okay, we're not doing that. And then we need to create a while loop, which will do the shaking for us as long as time is still running. So I've created this little while loop here. I'm going to put it in. So this while loop, it checks t, which is this float. It starts at 0, right? Then we check the duration, which is 0.25. And we say, okay, as long as the t value is less than the duration, run this code. And here, of course, we need to increment t or increase t to the point where it's going to be bigger than duration. So we just say, okay, however time has passed, however long the time that has passed, is add that to t. So let's say 0.03 seconds have passed. So we're going to add that to our t, and then now t will be 0.03 and so forth. And then what we do is we give our camera a new position. So it will be a random position between the minimum and maximum value that we have defined. So the minimum value and the maximum value. So the maximum value will always be the offset, and the minimum value will be the offset minus 0.1. So we're just moving it slightly bit. The same for the y value. So this is the x value, this is the y value, and then the z value will stay at 0. So we don't want to change the z direction. And then we change the local position of the camera based on our new position that we just calculated. So here we calculated it, and here we changed the camera's actual position. Then we rotate it a little bit. So here you see there we changed the position, local position. Here we're changing the actual rotation. So we're turning the camera back and forth a little bit as well, where we just say, okay, quaternion Euler, well, that's basically how you can access rotation and change rotation. And we say vector 3 forward with a random range between -2 and 2. And then we have slow motion to normal motion in a loop, so slowly going back to the normal speed. And we get that by using the Lerp function again. So linear interpolation between two values. So I'm saying give this returning back to normal speed a smooth transition. Okay, so it's not going to go to normal straight away without any preparation or whatever, but it's going to do that slowly, and that's what this does. So we're just saying, okay, time scale, so the scale at which time passes, we use that. This can be used for slow motion effects. Perfect, that's exactly what we use it for. Then we use 1, which is the normal speed, over t divided by the duration. So once t is as big as the duration, well, basically we are at normal time again. So it just goes to a normal speed again, and we say yield return. Now we just return null, so yield return, time is up. And then once all of that is done, we can set our camera local position to vector 3 0. We set our Euler angles to vector 3 0, so we just say, okay, reset everything. And we also reset the time scale to 1, which means we don't have a slow motion anymore, we have a normal speed now. Now, of course, we need to start this coroutine at one point, and we can also stop this coroutine before we start a new coroutine. And that's what we do with this method that I create here, public void call camera shake effect. I'm saying stop the coroutine, I shake, and then start the coroutine I shake. What is this I shake? Well, it's this method that we just created here. Okay. By the way, if you want to know more about coroutines, always just check out the documentation. I mean, they have not always the best explanations, but sometimes it's useful, right? So you can anytime check out what the start coroutine does and what end coroutine does and so forth here. Okay, now what would be a good spot to start this shaking? Well, I guess inside of our player hook triggers, we should add a little bit of a shake once we hit a hook. So let's just do that here. So I'm just going to say camera controller dot instance dot call camera shake effect period, or semicolon actually. So here, let's see, camera controller. Well, there I called it instance. Well, maybe I should stay consistent with it. So this one was in the camera controller and this one was in the player controller. So let's stay consistent and call these instances actual instance with a lower cap I. And here we have it, and here we're gonna do it as well. It's always good to stay consistent. in this manner. Okay, now let's save all of these scripts because there's a lot of scripting going on here. Now let's go back to our game. And you see we didn't change anything that we need to add here. It's all natural. So let's save this scene as well. And then let's run the game. All right, so there we are. So let me try to fly through one. You can see this was the shake effect that we just generated. So once I fly through one, we have this little bit of a shake going on here. Boom. And boom. All right, perfect. So now you know how to create this little camera shake effect. All right, so next we're going to take care of the game over panel, and actually you should take care of the game over panel yourself because I don't want to bore you with another half an hour or even more me building a user interface, dragging stuff around and entering a bunch of values. If you want to try it yourself, I can highly recommend to do that. It will really improve your UI creation skills. But if you don't want to do that, you can of course download the project and you can just extract the game over panel there and drag it over to your project here and then drag it into your game scene. So I'm going to do that real quick. I'm going to create a new UI element here. I'm just going to create a text. I'm going to get rid of that text and then I'm dragging the game over panel right into the canvas. And then it's available here. Of course, we don't see anything. That's because I have a bunch of fonts that need to be added. So let's just add the font that we have here and drag it into every single text element that there is so that we can see it. Okay, you can of course skip that. You don't need to watch me do that. I'm going to pause the video until I'm done dragging all of those in. And by the way, also make sure that you add a font to the text inside of the texts. Okay. Now just make sure that your canvas is set to screen space. And your renderer camera is your main camera. As well as the plane distance is set to 1. And that you scale with screen size. Here the sample resolution should be 1920 to 1080. And you see it's a lot bigger or a lot better and smoother. All right, so this is the user interface. It's not perfect, it's very basic, but you can see we have so many different texts and everything here. We can, by the way, also unpack this prefab. So it's not the prefab itself, but the actual game over panel inside of our project now. And yeah, that's pretty much our game over panel. We have buttons in here, as you can see. We have a bunch of texts. So almost everything is a text, except for those two buttons. So the retry button, which is this one here, actually. Let me go to the retry button, this one, and the home button. Okay, so this is the UI. You can drag around stuff as you like, but basically that's how I have it here. Next, we're going to look at the score system. All right, so you're a couple of minutes in. Thanks a lot for still being with me. I hope you enjoyed this video. By the way, if you want to learn more about C# or you feel like the whole content is a little over your head as of now, no worries. I have a complete C# masterclass in which you're going to learn everything you need to know about C# and also the fundamentals of Unity. And along the way, you're also, of course, going to learn how to use databases, how to use Link, how to create user interfaces for your PC programs with WPF, and a lot more. All right, it's an over 30-hour long course with high quality content, thousands of ratings, 4.5 stars overall. People love it. And you also get support from me. So that's really good stuff. All right, along the way, you're going to build 3 games. So it's going to be a little game that you maybe know already, which is Fruit Ninja, pretty successful back in the day. Then you'll build the Pong and a Zigzag Endless Runner game. This will not only teach you the fundamentals of those games, but in general teach you how to become really good at C#. All right, so I hope to see you in this course. Check it out. There's a link in the description with which you get a huge discount. So you'll get it for a significantly lower price than usually. So check it out. And now let's get back to the bad game. All right, now let's go ahead and take care of the score system specifically. And first of all, I'm going to deactivate this game over panel. I don't want to see it all the time. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to create a new object here, create empty, and I'm going to call this one script manager. And inside of the script manager, I'm going to create a new script, which I'm going to call game scene script. All right. So now you can, of course, go to your assets and drag this game scene script to your scripts, as well as you probably have done already with your player hook controller or hook trigger, which I haven't done before. Okay, so the script manager now has this game scene script. Let's go ahead and open that up. And here we're going to need the scene manager because we want to be able to move between scenes. And therefore I'm going to add this line here. This allows us to move from one screen or scene to another. Then I will need a bunch of variables, many of them, not even funny. Okay, so I'm going to put them in here because I think it's boring for you to follow along me typing all of that. All right, so what those variables do is, first of all, we need to have an option to activate or deactivate the game over panel, so to make it visible or invisible. Then we have a bunch of text. So for example, we have the kills text, how many kills did we do, so how many hooks did we destroy. Then the distance text, how far did we get away from the platform. Then the total score text, the in-game score text, in-game high score text, current money text, and the total money text. So basically all of those texts that we have in our project here. Okay, so if you go to your project here, you have all of these texts. Let's make it visible. And then you can actually have access to the different texts, right? We want to be able to change them via code, and that's why we need to create variables for them. Okay, so I'm gonna make this invisible again and go back to the code. Then we need a bunch of counters. So the in-game score counter, the high score counter for in-game calculation, the total score that we have acquired, the kill counter, how far have we come, this is the distance counter, and the current money counter. So these variables, they are all of type text. So we are going to use them just for accessing those text values in the user interface. And these ones here are the actual values, so the actual numbers, so to speak. Okay, and we need both because we need two counters here to do the calculation, and this is just to display the values. Okay, now we need the awake method. So here I'm going to create a private void awake method, which will just say that instance is this. Now instance is our game scene script instance, so this one here. All right, so now inside of the start method, what I need to do are a bunch of things. So let's have a look at that. First of all, I need to make sure that the timescale is set to 1, so that we don't have a slow motion effect going on. Then I set the game over panel to being inactive, so that it's not in our way. I'm making sure that it's set to false, so the set active value is set to false. Then I'm checking if we have anything stored. So if we have the high score of the player stored somewhere. So we check has player prefs key or player prefs has key, and if it's not the case, then we set the high score to 0. Okay, and then once we have done that, we can check the actual high score. So if it was empty before, we set it to 0. If there was a high score before, we're going to retrieve the high score and we're going to set it as the in-game high score counter. So player prefs allows us to basically store values that are very minuscule, such as integers, texts, strings, and booleans, and they're great for these kind of things, such as storing the high score, storing player preferences or settings or options. All right, so that's what this whole thing is for. And then we reset all of the scores, such as the in-game score counter, distance score counter, kill counter, total score, and total money counter. All of them are set to 0. Because at the beginning of the game, we have not killed anyone, or the player has not killed any objects, it hasn't gone any distance, and so forth. Okay, now I want to be able to move from this scene to another. So here, for example, when we want to recall this whole scene, we're just going to say, or actually when we want to go to another scene, we're just going to say to go to main menu when the game is over, or retry, we use the scene call method, which needs a scene index, and then we just load a specific scene. So we move from one scene to another. We have seen that before in this project when we moved from our menu to our main scene, to the game scene, so to speak. And then we need to take care of the condition when the game is over. So now let's consider, what do we need to do when the game is over? First of all, we should display the game over panel again because it's invisible, right? Then we should calculate the total score and display the total score. We need the current money counter, total money counter. We need to set the total money that we have now as being the total money counter variable. Then we need to make sure that the high score is checked. So if the current score is higher than the old high score, we need to overwrite the high score. If not, then we don't need to do that. And then we need to display all of them. Okay, so I prepared the code here. Let's just check it out together. So this would be the game over function that we would call here, for example, once we hit the lava. Okay, once the player hits the lava, that's when we would do it. Okay, so we set the game over panel to active. Then we calculate the total score. So that's the in-game score counter divided by 100. Then we take the total score. We add the total hooks killed. And we add the distance between the starting position of the player and the end position. So that's what is happening here. Then we add the current money to the total money. So total money counter will be the old total money counter plus the current money counter, because whatever money we acquired throughout this run through should be added to our total money so that we can then add upgrades later on. And then we need to make sure that the total money is saved in the player prefs so that it's not lost once we restart the game. And then we check, is there a new high score? So is the in-game score counter bigger or higher than the in-game high score counter? So the old high score, so to speak. If that's the case, then override it. So we say, okay, the current score is the old high score, and we then also store it in our player prefs. And show all of the values in the text fields of the game over panel. So the in-game score text should be set to the in-game score counter. Then the in-game high score text should be set to the in-game high score counter. Of course, always to string because text expects a string. And that's what we give it, okay? Kills text is the kill counter. Distance text is the distance counter to string. Total score text is the total score to string, as well as the current money text is the current money counter to string. And finally, of course, the total money text. And of course, we don't have a way to calculate the score yet and do all of these things, but we're going to do that later on, of course. Okay, so let's go back to our project. Let's save this, by the way. Let's go back to Unity. And there we will need to take care of the game over panel. And by the way, of course, for text to work, we need to add using Unity engine.ui. Okay, so we need to add this namespace, otherwise text will not be recognized and then we get a bunch of errors. So let's do that. And then after a while, text should become a light green like this one here. Or maybe once we come back. Okay, but at least the errors should disappear that we have here. So we had a bunch of errors. And then it's complaining that I'm missing the total money counter. So let's go ahead and create a variable for it real quick. So here, it's this one here. I forgot to put it in here. So that's the total money counter. And then this arrow should disappear. Now we have this thing with the instance again. Well, let's make sure that we call all instances with a small I, so uncapitalized, and then we can save the script and go back to Unity. All right, once that is done, we can turn on our game over panel, and then we can make sure that our script manager has all of those values. Okay, so it needs to have the game over panel. We can drag that in. It needs to have the kills text, which will be the kills text, so this inside of it. And maybe it's easier if we go to script manager, we fix it here, fixate it. Now we can drag stuff quite easily. So distance text, then score title or the score total, then current score, high score, and so forth. So current money text and total money text. All right, and now we can go to our retry button, for example. Therefore, I'm gonna unfix it. And here the retry button needs a functionality. I'm gonna drag the script manager directly in here. And now I can access the game scene script, and in retry what I want to do is I want to call scene call. Okay, I'm gonna call scene 1. Actually, I think that should be fine. And for the home button, let's do the same thing and actually drag in the script manager and do the same here. So we go to scene call and it's scene 0. So I'm going to save this game scene, and by the way, you of course need to make sure that the build settings are accordingly. So main menu scene will be 0 and the game scene will be 1, as you can see here. Okay, so this is going to be home, which brings me back, and retry, which will reset this scene. Of course, you need to make sure that those values that you have assigned here are exactly the same as you have here in the build settings. So 0 for our home button and 1 for our retry button. Okay. All right, and now if you want to try it, of course, you can go to your player hook trigger, and here we're just gonna say game scene script dot instance dot game over. All right, so what that will do is it will call this game over function here, or this game over method here, which is inside of our game scene. Okay, so let's save all of those scripts and go back to Unity. Once back here, we can go ahead and test our application. So there we are. Let's just lose real quick. You see, you did. We can retry. This reloads the whole page, which is great. So that works. Retry. And we fail and boom, retry, or we go home. So this leads us back to the home screen where we then can see this beautiful UI, and we can just say play and we're back in the game. All right, so that's it for this part of the user interface and the game over screen and also the score system. But of course we still need to implement a little more so that we can actually see all of those things like kills, distance, score, and so forth. And that's what we're going to do next. All right, so next we're going to add the score. So let's go ahead and create an empty object here, which I'm going to give this beautiful name pop-up text, because that's what it's going to be. Pop-up text. It's going to be a little bit of a pop-up text that will appear at the point where we hit one of those beautiful hooks. All right, so let's reset the position, and then I'm going to add a text mesh here. So you can just add a component and select text mesh. And there you can now enter a text. For example, let's just look at it. This is how it's going to look like. Okay, so I'm going to make some changes here. This should say +100. Then the character size should be 0.5, so a little smaller, something like that. We have the middle center. So I want this to be middle centered, just where the player is, so to speak. It should be aligned in the center as well. And the font size should be something like 30. Well, you can play around with character size or with the font size, either way is fine. And I want this to be, well, we need a font, right? So I'm going to drag a font in. So you can use any font you want. And then we need to make some minor changes to the mesh renderer as well. I don't need to cast any shadows, and I don't need to have any probes. So I'm going to deactivate all of that. And this is basically how it's going to look like. Well, we can't see it in the game yet, but we will see once we get points. Okay, you can also, of course, change the colors. I'm going to use a yellowish color for this, so it's a little more visible. And then we are going to need a animation window. So let's drag that in here. And we're going to need the animator window because we're going to use both of them. Okay, so once you are in animations, you can go ahead and create a new animation. So just click here, create, and give this creation or this animation a name and store it in your animations folder. So create a new folder, animations, and give this one a beautiful name. I'm going to call this one zoom in out animation. So zoom in out anim. And then I'm going to add property. So here I'm going to use transform as the property, and you can open it up a little bit. So here I'm going to click on plus, a plus on the scale. So this creates a new entry here because I want to play around with the scale a little bit. So then you can see here, this is the animation that we have in total. You can record something, you can hit record and then do something with it. Okay, so I'm going to hit record and I'm going to change the scale to 0.5 for all of them. So it should animate down, so it should become smaller. Then at frame number 10, I want this to change. So basically we start at 0.5 and then it goes all the way up to 1.2. So it's going to become bigger. And then at 60, so at the end, so here at the end of the frame iteration, I want it to scale to 1. So it should be at 1. And then at 80, so I want to do something else at 80, even more time later on. So 80, which means 1 second and whatever the iteration length is that you assign later on. But for now, I'm just going to say that then it should be 0. So I want it to scale all the way down to 0. And then it should just disappear. The game object will disappear. We're going to do that with our code. Okay, now if we go to our assets, I have this zoom in here, which apparently I didn't store inside of a extra folder. So as it seems, I didn't drag it in there. So let me create a folder here, which I'm going to call animations. And well, it says there is an animations folder, but it doesn't appear in my UI. So I'm going to drag the pop-up text and zoom in out into animations. Okay, and here I'm going to create a new folder, which I'm going to call pop-up text, and I'm going to drag them in there. Okay, so let's put both in there. And then we can go into this and we can now look at our zoom in out. You can see it has a loop time and I want to deactivate this. So I don't want this to loop. I don't want this to start over and over and over. Okay, I just want it to run once and then that's it. Okay, so let's go ahead and drag the pop-up text to our prefabs folder, which we don't have yet. So let's create one, create a new folder, which I'm going to call prefabs. And I want to drag the pop-up text in there, because I don't really want this to be inside of the game. I want to generate it myself via code actually. Okay, so in our game scene script, so script manager, game scene script, that's where we are going to do the magic for it. So let's add a little bit of spice to it and I'm gonna add it just here. I'm gonna say that I need to basically assign the pop-up text, so the transform, the position of the pop-up text. And then I want to create that pop-up text. So I want to make it visible, right? I want to make it appear, basically creating it. And in order to do so, I'm going to create a new function here, which I'm going to paste in here as well. So I'm going to paste it instead of the update method here at the very bottom. I'm just going to paste it in. So what is this init pop-up text going to do? Well, it needs a position, it needs the value, and it needs to know whether it's a score or not. So the position is the init position, which means the position where the score should be displayed. And in our case, it will be where the player hits the hook. Okay, then we want to know how many points we want to assign to this or display there. And then we want to say if it's actually a score or not. So maybe we have an idea later on to display something else. For example, if the player runs into an enemy, then it shouldn't be score, but it should be something else. Then we create an object which is text, a game object. We instantiate that game object, which is our ref pop-up text, which is basically this variable that we created here. Okay, so then we go ahead and set the initial position plus a little bit higher. So we just say, okay, it's just 1 on the y-axis up. And we use the rotation, so no changes in the rotation. And that is basically the game object that we create. So we say instantiate, which means create a game object. And when you instantiate a game object, you need to pass in the position and the rotation. Okay, and out of that game object, we create, well, this is our new text. Okay, so now we need to display a certain string in there. So first of all, we make an empty string. Then we check, is it score that we are displaying? If it is score, then display plus. If it's not score, then display $. So in our case, what we can do is we can get points, but we can also collect money. And this money that we collect will then be available for us to, for example, upgrade the player, okay, or upgrade the rope, upgrade the player, whatever. And then add value, which will change in strings. So we just say, okay, the string str will be the value that we have passed. Okay, so whatever has passed. So it will be string, basically plus the value or plus $. So either we add, let's say, value dollars, or we add value points. Okay, that's what this will do. And then we assign that text that we created. So to the get component text mesh, we add that text of the string that we just calculated here or prepared here. So for example, this could be plus 100. This would be whatever we calculated, and that will then be the new string, and we want this to be visible as a text mesh. And we've just prepared a text mesh in Unity, right? So basically, this is the text mesh which we have here in our prefabs. So our pop-up text, this is the text mesh. And we want to change its text based on whatever we have just prepared there. So whatever comes up out of this here. And then we just say, okay, destroy this game object after 2 seconds. So it goes through the whole animation process, and then it's not even going to be visible at the point when we destroy it. But we don't want to have game objects in our game that don't have any value or that are not visible. Because if they're not visible, and we're never going to make them visible, then they're just game objects that take away space or memory of our, well, our game memory, PC memory, phone memory, whatever, and makes our game slower. So we don't want that. We want this to be super efficient. Okay, so when would that be called? So when do we even call this init pop-up text? Well, in our player controller, and that is when we hit the hook. So let's see, hit hook. That's here. So once we hit a hook, we want to say game scene, what was it? Game scene script dot instance dot init pop up text, and we pass in the hook position and let's say 100 points. Okay, so game scene script, did I write it correctly? And well, the code was correct, but for some reason my beautiful Visual Studio didn't recognize it, so I needed to restart it. So in case you have the same problem, just restart your Visual Studio. Sometimes these things don't make sense, but for some reason it happens. Okay, so in our case now, it's gonna display this init pop-up text, which is this method here, which needs an initial position, it needs a value and a boolean. And as you can see, we set that to default true, so we don't even need to set that once we call this method. So it's optional, right? We don't need to put it in there. Okay, now let's go back to Unity and specifically to our prefab, so to our pop-up text, because we need to drag that pop-up text to our script manager now, because this is the reference pop-up text that we needed here, the ref pop-up text, and I'm going to drag that in there. All right, so next I'm going to go ahead and create a little panel here. So here a new UI element, and this will be a panel, and I'm going to call this one gameplay panel. And inside of this gameplay panel, I'm going to add a text, which I'm going to call current score display text. Now this current score display text, it should be towards the top, so anchored towards the top. Position will be 0 minus 110. Width should be 500 and height is going to be 100, as well as the text should be 0000, because we just want to see a score, right? So I'm going to assign the font to this current display panel because I want to display something, right? I want to see the score. I'm going to give it a certain position here, so align it centrally and align by geometry, as well as I'm going to best fit it to maximum size 100, and the color should be white, because the problem is that our whole background is already black, so we need to make it white. Now if you want to make this display visible, so this current score display, if you want to make this visible, by the way, save the scene, don't forget that, you need to go over to your code in your game scene script, and here actually we are going to need to create a new public text. So I'm going to do that at the top. So here public, actually let me paste that in here, public text current score display text. Well, you could of course have better names here, but that's how it is sometimes. I'm not really good at names, as you can see. And now we need to add the score to this whole thing, so to this display. So let's create a new function here. I'm going to put that at the very bottom, and this function is used to call the add score. So what it will do is it will increase the score by a certain amount. It's going to add to the total score, and it's going to set the total score that we currently have as a string to the total score text, which is our text object here. All right. And then we also want to set the current score display text to be that total score text. All right, now we may not forget to also assign that to our script manager. So here, current score display text. Actually, I didn't make the save yet, so make sure to save this script. Once it is saved, then you can go back and now you can drag it in there. So let's go to our manager, and here it is. So here, current score display text, I'm going to drag it in there. Don't forget to do that. And now we just need to add the score each time that we want to init the pop-up text. every time the player hits the enemy or the hook pretty much. So that is in player controller, and here that's where it would make sense to put it. So game scene script instance dot add score. So now we're actually going to add some score, and let's say 100 each time that we hit a hook. Now let's save that, and let's go back to our game. Let's also save this scene here, and let's run it. Let's just see. Okay, so we see the points there all the way up to the top, and now let me fly through one of those without dying. Come on. It's not so easy actually. Maybe I should position them differently, but there you are. So this is basically what we get. So if you want to test this without such a pain, you can just duplicate the hook and you can move it around so it's easier to hit. Okay, so this is in general what I would recommend. If you want to go towards the left hand side, this is going to be a lot easier. All right. Of course, they don't disappear yet. We need to take care of that. But overall, you can see we have a pretty cool effect already. For some reason, however, my text is not turning yellow. So let's quickly look at that. That is our prefab pop-up text. And here. Okay, so as it seems I didn't set the color correctly. There we are. So now let's test it again and fly through it. Boom. Yeah, baby, let's go. All right, so that's it for this part, and next we are going to take care of the text combo text animation pretty much. So when we have a combo of multiple enemies that we destroy in one go, so to speak. All right, so now let's go ahead and take care of that combo feature so that we can see the combos. And what is the general idea of this? So we have basically a combo running. Each time that we destroy one of those hooks, there is a specific amount of time in which we can destroy another hook, and that will count as a combo. So let's say if we destroy 2 within 2 seconds, that will be still a combo. If we destroy 3 within the next, every 2 seconds, we just need to destroy at least one of those hooks, and that will still count for the combo. And the bigger the combo is, the more points, for example, we could get. Okay, so that's the basic idea behind that. Of course, you can create your very own structure behind this. You can play around with the timings and everything later on. But for now, let's just create a little bit of a ground for this. So first of all, we need to go ahead and create a new combo text, and I'm gonna put it into the current score display text. So just underneath, I'm going to create a new UI text element, and this one will be called combo text. Now let's center it towards the top, so anchor it towards the top center, and I'm gonna play around with the values here. I'm just gonna say it should be 30 higher, the width and height is fine, then the text should be something like 000 as of now. We need to add our font in there. So let me close that and drag the font in there. Now I'm gonna open it up again. And that's not what I wanted. Okay, back to the combos. So here I'm going to center the text in both directions, and I'm gonna best fit it with a size of 50. And then maybe we should use some magenta color or something like that. So 255 and here 255, something like that. I think that's cool. All right, so let's just use this magenta color for the combo text. Here wrap truncate is fine. Everything else can stay as it is. Okay, so then that we have that, we can go ahead and create a new animation. So I'm gonna drag this animation screen over here, and I'm going to create a new animation inside of assets. And well, as it seems, we have this animations 1 folder. It was a little buggy, but yeah, let's just go ahead and create a new folder here for our current score display text. So I'm going to call this. And here I'm going to create a new animation, current score display text anim, and like this. Okay. It's a long name, but it's very descriptive. So now we have this new animation, and let's go over to this animation. So it's in our animations 1 folder. There was a little bug before and my animations folder wasn't showing up. So that's why I created this animations 1 folder. So let's go over to this animation. And now we are going to and once you click on the animation itself, so here current display, you see add properties grayed out, and that's why we have to click on current score display here, display text, and then we can add the property. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So we are going to go to rect transform, and we're going to play around with the scale here. So I want to play with the scale, and here I'm going to open up the scale, and I'm just going to say at 0, 0, 0, it should be 1, 1, 1. And then I'm going to start recording. So here, hit the record button. At 30, I'm going to set the scale at 1.1, 1.1, 1.1 on all 3 scales. So I'm basically just scaling the size of the text to up to make it bigger. And then at 60, I'm going to scale it back to 111. All right, and that's already pretty much it. Okay, so that's the recording that we have. And then just make sure that loop time here at the top is deactivated, because I don't want it to be looping all the time. Okay, now we can go over to our scripts, because we need to somehow manage it via code. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a new script here, which is going to be our combo controller. It's going to take care of combos. All right, so let's open it up. And I'm just going to start using Unity Engine UI. So here, I'm going to copy this line and add .ui here. And then we need to have an instance of this combo controller. So I'm just going to copy that code that I prepared here. So this is the combo controller instance. So we can access it from other classes. For example, we want to access it each time that the user makes a point, right? So each time we go through a hook, that's what we want to call. So we want to call this combo controller's methods. And in the awake method, I'm going to assign the instance. So here, instance is going to be this. All right, so this is not start, this is awake. Then I need to know whether the combo is still running or not. So I'm going to add this boolean here, which says is combo active. So for example, the combo is active for 2 seconds, and once those 2 seconds are over, I want to make sure that this combo is not active anymore. And then I also want to allow the user, or us as a developer pretty much, to change the range or the value of the combo time. It should be something between 1 and or 0 and 5. So 0 or 5 seconds. So that's pretty much the duration that I want to be able to set. So you can of course change that if you want. If you want to have combos all the way up to a minute, that's fine. But I just think anything above 5 seconds is going to be way too long. Even 5 seconds is already too long. Then we need to make sure that we have a combo counter, because we need to know how many combos we have or how big the combo is. Did we go through 1 of the hooks in time, or did we go through 2, 3, 4, whatever amount of hooks? And we can also limit the combos. So we can just say, okay, at one point there should be no higher combo than, let's say, 20 or whatever we can set up or want to set up. All right, then I want to display the combo counter. That's why we need the text. So at one point, we want to give this data that we calculated within this controller back to Unity so that it can display it in our combo text variable here, in this one, in this text. Okay. Then I need a combo animation so that I can run it. and that will be our animator. Okay, so I'm going to access the animator in order to change or start the animation pretty much. Okay, then we need the start method. Okay, I overwrote the start method here, but that's fine. So in the start method, we have, first of all, to make sure that the combo is not active. So we need to initialize it at one point, and we're initializing it in the start method, and we set the combo counter to 1. So this is the multiplier, right? So for example, if we go through 2 hooks within the combo time, then the second hook will get us double as many points. If we go through a third one, it will give us 3 times the points, and so forth. And then we need to take care of the actual combo adding feature. So this is where the magic happens. So this is going to be a little longer of a method, but overall it's not very complicated. So I'm just going to go over it with you. So we have this add combo, and it needs a score, and it needs an added score. So 2 integers, and it will return an integer. Okay, so it will return the new score value. Okay, so we check if the combo is still active or not. So is it activated? Is the combo active? If that's so, then increase the combo counter. So add combo will be called once we make a point, or each time that we go through a hook with a player. And then first of all, we check, is the combo active or not? If it's active, let's increase the combo counter. Then we will cancel invoke stop combo. So stop combo is going to be a method that we call in order to make sure that the combo is not running anymore, because here we want to cancel it. So we're saying if you were stopping the combo, now you can restart that. So don't stop the combo anymore. Cancel this invoke, or cancel the execution of stop combo. Because what invoke does, and this is here this method, so we have invoke and we say call stop combo in combo time. So in this case, example would be we set combo time to 3. So for example, we assign 3 here. Then after 3 seconds, this method stop combo would be called. Okay, we will look at this stop combo method in a second. Then otherwise start the combo. So we will have to have a function which also takes care of starting a combo. And then we have this play animation clip from start. So first of all, we go to this combo anim, which is our animator, and we call its play function. Now, what does this play function do? Well, it's this one here. It first of all needs the string state name, then the layer, and the normalized time. So the state name, well, it's just the state name. Then the layer index. If layer is -1, it plays the first state with the given state name or hash. And then the normalized time, the time offset between 0 and 1. And I'm going to set those 2 values to 0. And we basically play a certain state in our animator. If we look at our animator, we will see that we have the current score display text anim, which will be the animation that we want to play. And that is, by the way, the one that we use the motion, which is our current score display animation. That's the one that we prepared just a bit ago. Okay, so that's how they are combined together. So the animation is inside of the animator, and the animator takes care of different states. And we could have transitions between different animations, but for our text, that's really not necessary. So we have a very basic animation here. If you want to know more about animations, definitely check out another video of me where I'm specifically going over animations. Okay, so I'm playing this animation, and then I'm checking the combo counter. So clamp the value between 1 and max combo variable. So the combo counter is the value that we get. For example, 3. So let's say we had a combo of 3. And now I want to check that the value is not less than 1 and not higher than max combo. Okay, so it's between 1 and max combo. And then we of course also want to display the combo counter. So I'm just going to say text combo should be the text where we say x, so times the combo counter. So for example, times 3. And finally, we need to return. And what do we return? Well, we return the old score plus the added score times the combo counter. So the added score is the integer that is given to this function when it's called. and the combo counter is whatever the current combo is. Okay, so we're clamping it by the old value, we're increasing it here, you can see we're incrementing it, but the combo counter was here 0 from the start. Well, actually it was 1 from the start, we set it to 1. So here it was 0, but then we turned it into a 1 at the start method. Okay, so that is our add combo method. And now we need to have the start combo and end combo or stop combo methods. Let's look at those. So I created those two here. Let's look at the start combo first. So when we call the start combo method, what we say is that the combo is active. And that is the case once we hit one of those elements, so one of those hooks. And then once we hit it, we invoke directly the stop combo after a certain amount of time. So let's say the combo time is 3 seconds. So after 3 seconds, it will automatically call this function called, or this method called stop combo. So where is stop combo? Well, it's this method here. So now we're saying in the stop combo method, make sure that is combo active is set to false. Make sure that the combo counter is set to 1. And make sure that the text combo text is set to x times the combo counter. So we reset that value. And now we can also look back a little bit. So here in add combo, we cancel invoked stop combo once we have a combo that is active. So if the combo is active and we add a point, then we cancel the stop combo. So we just say, okay, you wanted to stop the combo here after 3 seconds. So now we reset those 3 seconds. So we say, okay, now from this moment on, we have another 3 seconds. And then we invoke it. So we just say, okay, now we actually want to restart these 3 seconds. So this is where we stop the combo again. So here we stop the stop combo and here we restart the stop combo. So basically we are resetting the timer that is going on, which allows us to make combos. So the timer will extend each time that we hit another hook within the combo time. Okay, so that is basically the code for our combo controller. Let's save that and let's go back to Unity. Now let's go to our combo text and let's give this combo text this beautiful script that we just prepared. So here combo controller is going to be the script that I'm going to assign here, and you can see now we need to assign some values. So first of all, we can play around with the time. So let's say the combo time should be 3, the combo counter should be 0, the maximum combo counter can be, let's say, a combo of 16, crazy combo. Then we need to have the text that we want to display. So I'm going to drag the combo text directly into this text combo, and the combo anim, that should be our current score display, because our current score display has the animation, which is the same animation that we had for the current score. All right. Okay. And at this point, we of course need to call this add combo method that we prepared here beautifully. And where do we do that? Well, as I said earlier, each time that we hit a hook. So let's just do that here, where we are going to actually, let's do it in add score because it really makes sense to put it in here. So in game scene script, we're going to go ahead and add the combo. So total score should be the combo controller dot instance dot add combo, and here we pass in the total score as well as the score. Okay, now in my case it's complaining again. It doesn't know about any combo controller even though it exists, so I'll need to refresh my Visual Studio. Okay, so now I restarted my Visual Studio and now the combo controller bug disappeared. Okay, so then we can go back here and we can go to our combo text. Let's check if everything is there. Everything seems to be there. And now let's go ahead and start. Okay, let's try to make a combo. You see, I'm comboing here really hard. Okay, the combo was over and then I'm dead. Okay, let's retry. and I'm trying to access something that is out of bounds. Well, we still have this little bug here where we're trying to access the collider if it's out of bounds, or transform get nearest. So what we could do is you can check if colliders, so this one here, dot length is greater 0, then return colliders index transform, otherwise return null. Okay, let's run this again. All right, now we can see we can have combos here. The points get higher and higher each time that we go through one of those thingies, but once the time is over, you can see the combo. We see always the combo here at the top. You could now, of course, make it a little bigger, but you see that the combo is always there, and we can always see what the current combo is. And once the time is up, you see the combo is going back to 1. Okay. All right. So that's it for the combo text. Now you know how to create such a beautiful little combo. Of course, we still need to take care of many other aspects of the game, but that's what we're going to do later on. All right, so now comes the part that you've all been waiting for, and that is the auto generation of hooks so that we can actually play the game. Because now, of course, we can play the game, but there's not much happening, right? So we have those predefined hooks that we manually generated or created, but that's it. We cannot really play the game. So once I'm here, I cannot go further up or anything. And that's what I want to change in the next part. And this is going to take a long time because we're going to do many things at the same time. So we're going to add new hooks. So different types of hooks, for example, money hooks. We're going to add enemy hooks. Well, we have them, but we will need to define the code for them and so forth. All right. So this is what we're going to do in this video. We will auto generate hooks. We will generate 100 manually, but then we will auto generately use those in order to not show more than 100 or calculate more than 100 hooks or have them at the same time in the game. Because what you don't want to do is generate hooks and hooks and hooks, and if the player is really good, then you will have thousands of hooks generated in your game, and that will slow down your game. So the more game objects you have in the game, the slower your game will be. And that's why we will limit that to 100, and we're gonna build that up step by step. Okay, so let's go ahead and start by creating new scripts. Okay, we're gonna need new scripts here. Create C# script, and this one will be hook controller. And then I need another script, which will be our hook pooler. And it somehow disappeared here. I need to rename it. Hook pooler controller. Okay, so this is going to take care of creating the pool of hooks so that we only have a certain amount of hooks at the same time. Okay, now let's make sure that our hooks are inside of one hook object. Okay, so let's create a new game object, and I'm going to call this one hooks because I want to put all of my hooks in there, and the animal hook as well as those ones. So they should all be in there so that we can just close it down and we still have an overview of what's going on. And by the way, don't forget to save the game scene, otherwise if the game crashes or the PC crashes or whatever, everything that you've done will be gone. So always make sure to save it. Okay, so now we have all of those hooks. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a empty game object, which will be hook parent, and I'm going to drag in the hook here to this hook parent. And actually, let me get rid of all of the other hooks except for the enemy hook and drag that hook parent into hooks. The idea behind this is that I want to be able to move the hook around, so rotate the hook depending on where the player is. So when the player connects to the hook, so the spring joint connects to the hook, I want it to be able to be connected correctly, right? So here hook parent and hook, I'm going to reset them so that they are both at the same position, and then I can duplicate them. But before I do that, I'm going to make sure that my hook has the hook controller script. So I'm going to put that into the game object, so into the hook, and I'm going to deactivate it. So the hook controller should be deactivated. Why is that? Well, the problem is if I activate it, then I'll have 100 activated scripts, and those scripts, they will do something that they shouldn't do all at the same time. They should only execute during runtime once the player connects to them, pretty much. Okay, so that's why we deactivate it, and we will activate each hook individually in runtime or during runtime. Okay, now let's do the same thing with the enemy hook. So I'm going to create an empty object. I'm going to call this one enemy hook, or maybe we can call it hook E, standing for enemy parent. Okay, and then the enemy hook will be inside of that, and we can drag that into the hooks. Okay, now what we can do is we can duplicate this hook that we have here, and we can just position it at multiple spots here inside of our world. And I'm going to do that multiple times here. So now what we can do is we can copy all of them and duplicate them, and to just move all of them around a little bit. So I'm going to move them up here, duplicate, and move around a little. So of course you can have different distances and all of that, but it all depends on how you want to run the game. Okay, so duplicate, position. So here the player is free to move both directions, right? So that's the idea behind me positioning them like this. They're maybe a little too close to each other, we will see later on, but that's just how I do it right now. You can of course make them significantly further apart, but at least there should be some hooks in the game view or in the view of the player. Okay, so probably we don't need to go as high actually. Okay, that was already enough. So we have 96 hooks. That's going to be fine. Actually, let me get rid of some of those hooks because I need some enemy hooks in there as well and some other hooks as well. So I'm going to duplicate this evil hook in there. I'm going to drag it at some points. It really isn't that much of an issue here. Just play around with it. And of course also make sure that your hook parents have this hook controller as well. And not just the parents, but actually the enemy hook. I'm gonna drag that. Well, I could have done that before. Would have been better probably, right? Before I copied and pasted it. So that's something that you have to consider when building this. Hook controller into the enemy hook. And here as well. And once again. And one thing, if you didn't do that before, really make sure that all of your box colliders are triggers for those hooks, okay? So all of your hooks should be box colliders. Okay, now let's go ahead and do some coding. And therefore, we are going to, first of all, create a couple of variables that we will need in our hook controller. All right, let's look at that. Okay, so first of all, we need to know whether this hook controller should be active or not. So if player grappling, then activate. That's basically it, right? Then we need the player's transform, so the position of the player, so the target, or it will be the target. Then we have the parent of this hook controller itself, which means it will be the hook parent. And then we have a vector 3, which is the previous Euler angles of parent game object, because what we want is we want to move it around, and therefore we need those two. By moving around, I mean I want to be able to rotate my hooks a little bit when the player is connected to them. So for example, here we could rotate it depending on the angle the player is at or is in comparison to the hook. Okay, now let's create an on-enable. All right, so then I'm going to add a little method here, which is the on-enable method. This will be called after the awake method and after the start method. So we're going to activate or set activate to true. We're going to check, is our parent null or not? And in our case, well, our hook has a parent, right? So we're trying to see if the parent is available. And if that's the case, then we're going to set the vector 3, which is the previous Euler angles, to be the parent's Euler angles, so the parent's rotation. And then we rotate towards the player controller's position. So to the player's position, so to speak. And here, by the way, this should be instance because we called this player controller instance here. Okay, so we are accessing the player controller and then we transform the Euler angles. So this rotate towards is, by the way, a method that we need to create as well. So let's just do that real quick before we go to the start method. So what does that do? Well, it needs a vector 2, which is the target. So a 2D vector, so to speak, direction. And we have a little bit of an offset. So I'm going to have an offset of 90 degrees and it will give a direction to the target. So here I'm saying that the direction, which is a vector 2 variable, should be the target's vector 2, so the target's direction, minus the transform position. So this will give the direction to the target. So then we need to normalize that direction so that it's just going to be a length of 1. So that's what normalize does, because if you work with vectors, then the line that you create can be longer than 1, and we just normalize it. We say we should want to have a line of 1, so this is going to be the vector direction here, and we get the current angle of the hook by using this mathematical calculation. So we use the 8 and 2 where we pass the y and the x position of our direction, and then we multiply it with the radiant 2 degrees. So we want to have degrees afterwards, and that's what we store in angle. And then we set the parent rotation based on that angle with a little bit of offset. So we add 90 degrees to that z position which we want to rotate. So quaternion Euler vector forward multiplied with whatever rotation we have here. So depending on where the player is, that will be a different rotation, but we have a little bit of an offset of 90 degrees. So we are hitting the long lines of the hook pretty much. Okay, now let's go ahead and take care of the start method. So inside of this, we need to make sure that our target is set. So we have this variable transform target where we need the position of the player. And well, guess what? We take it from the player controller .instance.transform. So we take the position of the player, and not only the position, we take the whole transform, right? So the scale, the rotation, and the position. Then we get the parent's transform, we get the parent's angle, and we set that, and then we rotate it towards the player, which is the target, right? We rotate it towards the same position. And then we finally set the angle of the hook itself. And now you maybe understand why we didn't activate the hook for every single, or the script for every single hook, because otherwise we have a bunch of rotating hooks and that would look funny. So now we just have one hook that will rotate depending on the position of the player. Okay, now what I want is that the rotation follows the player. And with the onEnable and the start method, we can only have one only call. Okay, those methods are called once in the lifetime or in the active state of the controller. But I want the hook to be rotating with the player. So depending on where the player is, I want the hook to keep on rotating. And if you want to do something continuously, then that is something that you would do in an update method, because the update method is called once per frame. So here we can just also do the same thing as we did here. We just rotate towards our target position, which is our player. And the update method will only be called after the start method, right? So the start method is already ready. We already have a target, and then we can go ahead and rotate. And then we have another method that we need to add. So because we need to make sure that we also set this variable is active to false again once we disable that specific hook controller for that specific hook. Okay, because each hook has a hook controller assigned to it, but not each of them is active, or not each of them is enabled. So we need to make sure that once they're disabled, that is active, it's set to false, and that we reset the parent rotation to the, or that we reset the rotation to the initial state. That's pretty much the idea here. Okay, so that is the hook controller as of now. And now I'd recommend a little break, get some tea or coffee or maybe milk, depending on what you prefer. And then we can go to the next part, which will be updating some more code in the player controller script and in the other scripts that we have, because this is a lot of coding coming up. But I hope I explained it well enough so you can follow along what's going on here, because these are the things that take quite some time to develop. So this is not something that you would build within a couple of minutes yourself. You would really have to think about all of these things and do it step by step. So it's significantly more complex than just copy and pasting it in here, but I'm explaining everything, how it's done, and you can then reuse it for your own applications. Okay, so you're reusing certain steps for your own applications in the future. Quick pause. So I built this complete Unity masterclass course in which you're going to learn how to build real games and how to build them from scratch. So you're going to learn how to build a platformer game, how to build a Space Invaders clone, how to build a Fruit Ninjas clone, and optimize it for mobile and export it for mobile as well, how to build a first-person shooter game, and finally how to build a tycoon game similar to Adventurist, which is an endless game. So if you want to become a real game developer, definitely check out the course. You can find the link in the description and you will get the course with a huge discount, so don't hesitate, as you will not only get the course, but you will also get it in a structured manner with all of the code, as well as a Q&A section with a 5-star support. So get the course now. I hope to see you there. Alrighty, so now if we look at it and we play the game, we will see that we have a bunch more of those, but at the same time you can also see there is this funny behavior of enemies flying around, and also for some reason the score isn't calculated correctly anymore. You can see here, well, actually the score is calculated correctly, but the number that is displayed is not correct. So we will have to fix some things, but we will have to also adjust some code here and add some more. And by the way, this enemy hook feature, or this weird behavior of enemy hooks, is due to the enemy hooks having the script. So you can see why it is important that we deactivate the script for all of those enemy hooks that we created. All right, so I'm going to deactivate those. And then, did I have another enemy hook? Nope, that's it. Okay, if we play it now those enemy hooks shouldn't fly around everywhere and create this weirdish behavior. But at the same time, you can see we have no... Okay, yeah, everything is fine. Now let's see if we can make combos. Yeah, we can do combos, but it's not displayed. Okay, now let's go ahead and add some more code to our player controller, because we need to take care of some of these things, right? So in order to do that, we will need a hook point. So the hook point will work as a rope and hook, which will stick to the hook and rotate with the hook. So let's go ahead and create those. I'm going to create this new variable here. And this one should also be part of the comment. So we have this private variable here, which is a transform, which means position, rotation, and scale. And then we need to make sure that in the start method, we add a line that takes care of this hook point. So we're going to create a new game object, because as you see here, this hook point is just an empty variable as of now, an empty object, a field, as you can see here. But to be making sure, what we do here, we give it a new game object. So we create a new game object in this scene via code. So we're not creating a new game object in Unity as we would usually do, where we go ahead, right click, create game object, but we do it in code. So that's basically the same thing as we would do in Unity. And then we change the name. So you can change the name of game objects by using this approach here, where we say hook point is name equal, and then the name that you want to assign. Then in the grappling start method, which is inside of our player controller, we need to add some more code. So here we had this hook hit physics raycast, where we transformed the position, normalized it, and it was based on the layer mask and all of that. Now we need to add a little bit about the hook hit here and the hook point. So we prepared the hook hit before, right? And now we also created this new variable, which is our hook point. And now what we're going to do is we're getting the raycast data, and then we change the hook point parent. So here we say hook point, the parent of it should be the hook hit transform. So the position of the hook hit, wherever hook or whatever hook we hit, we want to change that. And then we change the position of that hook point to the hook hit point. So wherever we hit that hook, that's going to be the hook point. Okay. And then we enable the hook controller for that hook. So basically this code here takes care of activating the hook again, because you might remember the hooks are all deactivated, right? So if we look at it, each of those hooks has an deactivated controller and we want to activate it, and that's how we do it in the code. Okay, so this is how you enable a specific component. In our case, it's the hook controller that we activate. Now, of course, the line also has to change. So here, when we are grappling, so here now, instead of going to hook hit dot point, we go to hook point dot point. Okay, so before it was the hook that we hit, but now we look at the hook point that we hit, and we want to get its position. Okay, so not the point itself, but the position. So the hook point has a position now, and we want to get that. Okay, so the hook point, by the way, as we just saw earlier, is this new game object that we created, to which we assigned the hook hit point as a position. And then in grappling end, we also need to make a little update. So once we don't grapple with the hook anymore, so once we don't touch it anymore, we want to make sure that the hook point parent is set to null. So we reset it, and we also make sure that the hook controller is disabled. So we say hook controller enabled is equal to false. So the hook that we hit, we're going to deactivate its script. Then we have another thing that we need to take care of, and that is when the player is dead, then we don't want to be able to do hooking anymore. Okay, so the player shouldn't be able to hook once the player character is dead, right? So let's go ahead and create a new boolean here. So this will stop the grappling functionality once the player is dead. Okay, so private bool is dead is the new variable here. And then in the update method here, inside of the update method, we need to make sure that we check if the player is dead, then don't do anything, just return. Okay, at this point, all of that code will not be executed anymore. We will not do any grappling anymore, and so forth. Okay, once we did all of that, let's save that script and go back to Unity, where we are going to change the player, because now the player parent has to be adjusted a little bit. So here the spring joint, for example, that we have here should be deactivated because we're activating it via code now. And the player script, here we can change the minimum distance to 0.1, for example, but in general, you can just play around with the values if you want. And at this point, we can see if our game works still after all of these changes. So let's see. So the combo doesn't work, but what does work is you can see the elements are rotating. So those hooks, they are rotating once they are hooked. Okay, as you can see, also the enemy is not working correctly anymore, but we're going to fix all of that, no worries. Okay. Next, I'd say we set up the hook pooler so that it generates those hooks for us automatically. Okay, so now let's take care of that by going to the hook pooler controller. So this is going to take care of creating all of the different hooks. And here we need to know the position of the player first, because based on that position, we are going to create all of those hooks, right? So to know the player position, we have to add its transform. And then we are going to have a bunch of variables that we take care of. So first of all, regarding the hook counter, and here we have the variable that takes care of the amount of active hook counters, and then the total hook count. So this is the hooks we want to have in our scene, and these are the ones that are active, and we will try to keep them at the same level pretty much. So we don't want to have more hooks than the total, let's say 100 for example. Okay, then we want to have the normal hooks. So we have a reference for the normal hooks. We need to know how many normal hooks we want to have, and we need to pass in the prefab for the normal hook so that we can then reuse that. And we also should have the rate per frame. So how many hooks per frame we can create. And then we need to have a list of active hooks. So we're going to create this list, which is an array of hooks. Okay, so we're going to use transform objects here. So we're going to say, okay, we want to have a bunch of hooks inside of that list, and pretty much all of the hooks that we have, they should be in here in this list. Okay, so first of all, we're going to create an awake method. Awake is a predefined method in Unity, and we calculate the total hooks before the start method. Okay, so we set the total hook count based on the normal hook count. So this normal hook count is the amount of normal hooks. And as you might know, we will have more than just normal hooks. We will also have enemy hooks and money hooks and all of that. And then I need an IEnumerator that allows me to generate hooks, okay? Because I don't want to do it in the main thread. I want to do it in parallel, so to speak, and with a routine. And that's where the IEnumerator helps me. So I'm going to create this new method that will return an IEnumerator that needs the reference hook, so the hook that we want to create, and the amount of hooks that we want to create. And while hook count is greater than 0, I want to run a for loop here. So this for loop is going to see if the rate per frame is higher than Ri. And if that's the case, or I is lower than rate per frame, and our hook count is still greater than 0, we will increase it. Okay, so by the way, this hook count greater 0, we did that in a while here as well, but the thing is we are decreasing it inside of this for loop. So the for loop is inside the while loop, so this for loop is constantly running until the point where this is not the case anymore, and then it will run out of to this while loop, and then it will do the real return. Okay, so then it will jump out, so to speak. So we have this code here which will be executed for every single hook that we want to create. So with this for loop, we create a bunch of hooks depending on whatever amount we have entered here. So for example, if we have 5 here as hook count, then we will generate 5 hooks with this for loop. And what it does is it creates a new hook based on the reference hook, which is a game object. So which is our normal hook prefab that we will create. Okay, so we need the prefab of our hook, and then we will auto generate hooks. So that's what this line does. So it instantiates new hooks. And then we change the hook parent to hook pooler controller, so to the game object. And we add that to our hook list, because if you recall, we had this list of a bunch of hooks. That's our hook storage, so to speak. And then we increase the active hook counter by 1, because now we have more active hooks, right? And at the same time, this hook count variable, which is just a variable that we passed here, so how many hooks we want to generate, is going to be reduced by 1. Otherwise, this for loop would be a never-ending loop, but that's not what we want. So we don't want to have an infinite loop here. And once all of that is done, wait for the frame to end and then get out of this whole enumerator. Okay, so as you might recall, when we use enumerator, we need to start a coroutine to even make this run. Okay, so inside of the start method, I'm gonna make it run by calling the start coroutine. Okay, so I'm gonna say at the start, go ahead and create hooks. So based on the ref normal hook, which is a game object, and however normal hook count we have. So make sure that we have enough hooks inside of our game and generate hooks for us in this scene. So now let's save the script and go back to Unity. All right, now we need to have a hook pooler controller object, or an object that takes care of those hooks, right? So let's go ahead and create an empty object, and I'm gonna call this one hook pool controller. So this is gonna take care of this hook pool that we want to have, right? And I'm going to drag the script in there. So this hook pooler controller. And as it seems, I have a little bug here, or I had a bug before where I didn't rename it correctly, or it wasn't renamed, even though I changed the name of the script. But when I created it, it was already called new behavior script. So I'm going to change that to hook pooler controller, or actually let's rename it correctly. So here, right click, rename, and here hook pooler controller. And let's rename it and save that script. And now we can use it in Unity. So now let's drag that in there. Hook pooler controller. There we are. Okay, and then we can change the normal hook count to, let's say, 100. And the reference hook should be one of our hooks, right? I'm going to use the hook parent here. Or actually, let's create a prefab for that. That's a good idea. So here we have the hook parent, and now let's use that as the ref normal hook, because this makes sure that we don't have a problem where we accidentally destroy the hook and then it's gone or something like that, and we cannot reproduce something that is not there. So I'm gonna do it like this, and I deleted the prefab directly from in here. And then what we're gonna do is we are going to take all of those hooks except for the enemy hooks, right? So take all of them all the way here and drag them into this list. And it will automatically drag all of them in there. So we have a list of 91 in there now. So you can see all of the hooks that I created are inside of our hook pooler controller. And we can actually even drag them into the hook pooler controller. So let's do that. Let's pull them or drag them into the hook pooler controller here. So now we have the hooks and we have the hook pooler controller hooks. Okay, so these hooks will be, for example, for now our enemies, and then also one ordinary hook that we have inside of the game, which is, let's see which one it is. Oh, that's the hook parent, right? Hook E parent. That's not even a good one. It's the enemy. The evil ones. So let's give the hooks this one, this default one that we have, and maybe this one here as well, or actually this one here as well. So let's drag those into the hooks that will be there from the start. And by the way, actually for now we don't need those evil parents, so I'm just going to create an evil hook parent prefab as of now, and I'm going to get rid of them in my game scene. Also, by the way, I'm going to save the game scene, so it's not going to be gone. And now the next thing is that we need to make sure that the positions of those new hooks that we created is going to be generated far enough apart from each other. So we want to make sure that they are far enough apart from each other, but at the same time they're not too far outside of the area of the player, because otherwise there is no need, because we cannot get there, right? We cannot get far enough to be there. So we're basically generating some sort of a circle around the player in which those elements can be, but they cannot be outside of the area. Okay, so that's the idea. Okay, so let's go back to our hook pooler controller, and here we need to take care of that. So of the distance and all of those things that we still need to add here. For example, I need to have variables that take care of that. So I'm gonna add them here. Okay, so here we have the hook distance conditions. So the minimum distance from the player, the maximum distance from the player, as well as the far distance from the player. And now based on those values, we want to change the position of the hook that we generate. So each hook should have a individual position, okay, because we don't want to have hooks to be at the same spot, right? And that's what this new method was for. So I'm going to go through it step by step with you. So the method is a private void change hook position, and we need to have the hook child. So we need to have the hook that we want to generate, so basically the prefab, and that's what is passed to this method. Then we have this boolean, which is far set to false. So we just say, okay, by default is far is false. And then we want to get a random direction. So we get a random direction on the X and Y coordinate. We don't take the Z coordinate into consideration here because it's going to be 0 anyways. But we just want to know, is it going towards the top right, towards the right, top left, and so forth. So that's what this vect3 is for. Then float distance, define the distance variable. And now we are going to calculate the distance variable. So check if the hook will be far or near. According to that, set the distance. So if it is far, then we want to get the distance based on the far distance and the max distance. And else we want to have it with the min distance and max distance. So it should be in between there. So that's going to be the distance in which the hook is. So first we get a direction, and then we know how far it is. So for example, if this here is the point, well, let's look at it in Unity. Maybe it's simpler this way. So if this here is the point, so this point here, where we want to calculate the direction from. So first of all, let's say it's top right. Okay, so it's top right. It's a line here going towards the top right. And then based on the distance, we define whether it's here, or if it's a longer distance, it will be here, or if it's a longer distance, it might be here, and so forth. So this is what is calculated here. Random range gives us a random value between the first and the second value. And then we have the new position, which is a vect3, so a position within the 3D world, where we say the player position, where the player is currently, plus the direction multiplied with the distance. So that's exactly what I just told. And then we have this, is it far? If that's the case, then if also the vector distance of the new position and the player position, so is the new position distance to the player lower than the far distance? If that's the case, then change the hook position to hook child is far and return. So get out of this function. If it's not far, so else if, create an overlap circle with the new position and one distance, and see if there is the hook or the ground in its nearer area. Okay, so if there is something that has a layer of hook or ground. So what is the layer again? Let's quickly look at it. So for example, if I click on a hook, here, hook parent, it can have this layer called hook. Okay, so that's what we should do with our hook. So maybe I'll change up a bunch of things later on. So yeah, I'm going to change this to the children. So yes, let's add the layer And well, I did that for the pool controller, so that's not what I wanted. I actually wanted it to be for the hook parent, and I blocked it here. So this hook parent here, this should be of hook. Or actually, let's see. Actually, our hook is already of layer hook. So, okay, the hook is already in the right layer. So we don't need to change anything. We did that in the past. Very good. So this is the layer. And for example, the lava also has a certain layer. Okay, so here it should be the ground layer. So our lava should be of the layer ground here. It already had the tag lava, but now it's also going to have the layer ground. And now we just say, okay, in that overlapping circle, change the hook position with the hook child and whatever the is far value is. Is it true or is it false? Just pass that. So what do these two methods do? They call themselves, or these two if, or this if and else if statement. So what it does is, if it is far, then calculate it again. So if it's within this condition, then calculate a new variable. And the same for this one. If it's overlapping, calculate a new value for the position. So calculate a new position. So if none of those two is true, then we say, okay, the hook child parent position will be the new position that we just calculated. And the angle will be a 0 vector, as well as the parent's angle will also be a 0 vector. So 0, 0, 0. Okay, so let's save that. And we had this I enumerator, init hooks. And now in init hooks, we need to add this line here where we now finally also change the position of the hook that we generated. So with init hooks, we generate hooks, right? But with change hook position, we are finally also changing the position of the hook that we generate. So for the for loop, we say for every single iteration of this for loop, generate a hook, but then add that hook to the list. And don't forget to change the position of this hook, because otherwise we have a bunch of hooks at the same spot. So now if we go back to Unity and we look at our hook pool controller here, and by the way, we should always save our scripts. So let's save that script as it is. And then we go back to Unity and open up our hook pool controller. And here we say, see that we have no player yet. So we need to drag in the player parent as the player variable here, as the object that is passed. So now it takes its transform, so its position, because that's what we want to have from the player. We want to know where the player is. Okay, at this point, what you can do is you can get rid of all of your hooks and all of your hooks within the hook pool controller. So delete all of those, and also go to your hook pool controller and make sure that you set the size to 0, because here you had a bunch of hooks before, right? The ones that we generated manually or we dragged in manually, they all can be gone now. Now what's important is that you assign a minimum distance, maximum distance, and a far distance. And I'm just gonna use some values here. So for example, well, this one will be 80 and this one will be 90, something like that. You can play around with those values, and then let's start the game just to see if it actually does something. So if it's gonna generate the hooks for us, and as you can see, we have a couple of hooks here, and actually we have multiple hooks. So they are all auto-generated for us now. Okay, so here's another one, and each time I get away further and further, it generates hooks, but well, you can see it's not getting rid of the old ones, and we are not generating new hooks outside of the ones that are generated at the start. So that's what we need to still take care of. Okay, so now let's take care of doing that, of generating hooks all around, and not just from the start position, but also when we are moving. Okay, so let's go to our hook pool controller, or hook pooler controller, and we will need a new method here, which will generate new hooks, and this is going to be the hook manager. Okay, so I have this hook manager checking hook positions and change hook if it is far from the player. So this hook manager here is going to wait until all hooks are in the scene. So wait until active hook counter is equal to the total count, and then we have this distance, and we check for each hook in hook list, what is the distance between the hook position and the player position. If that distance is bigger than the maximum distance, then change the hook position to the new hook position. So we're not generating a new hook, but we're actually just moving the old hook to a new position. And then wait for the end of the frame. That's pretty much it. So now let's go ahead and call this method. And we should do that in the start method, because this is a coroutine that should run. Okay, start coroutine hook manager. So let's save that and let's get back to Unity. And what's really important is that we have this min dist, max dist, far dist, and so forth, that we have that in there. Now let's test it. And let's see how far we get with this. All right, so there we are. It generated the hooks for me. As you can see, the hooks are moving around. And we can fly further and further and further. And at the same time, let me pause the video. Let's have the scene open in parallel so that we can see both of them, like this. Okay, so let's zoom out. Well, actually, we don't even need to, but let's just have it here in parallel so that both of them are open. And, well, okay, I got dead because of whatever. So let's just see in the scene. So let me move over in the scene to the start position. Okay. And now let's get some hooks here. And you can see here, it generates new hooks here. Here it generated new hooks all the way up here. And it constantly generates new hooks for me. All right. So that is basically the core game mechanic. We can now actually play the game. All right. So now we still have the bug with displaying of the 100. It always displays 100. And we're not overwriting the value. That's something that we can look at. And the code for the number is here. So you can see we have the init pop-up text, which is the hook position, but it always just shows 100. But it should be 100 times combo controller dot, and let's look if we have an instance. We do have an instance. Dot instance dot, and here the combo counter. So however high the combo is. So let's save that script and let's test it again. If now the values are correct. So if we display the right values there, in terms of the points that we get each time, because we had the problem that it didn't display the right values there. Okay, so let's look at this game and see if we can get a little bit of a combo. Actually, I need to get some speed. I'm too slow. I need to get faster. Well, actually, for testing purposes, it would be smarter to... Okay, there we are. So now it's displaying the right values. It would be smarter to take care of having the spots next to each other. So just some of those hooks directly next to each other so that you can actually test this whole feature. Okay, but you see now it works. Now it displays the correct value. We have all of our beautiful hooks, but we don't have enemy hooks yet. So let's take care of enemy hooks because, well, they just don't do anything yet. And they're not even there actually. Okay, so let's go to the hook pooler controller because that's where all of those hooks are created. And you could call this one hook generators or something like that. But let's just add the enemy hook in there. So we had this normal hook and I'm just gonna add the enemy hook underneath it. So now set the value of how many hooks you want to instantiate, or how many enemy hooks you want to instantiate, and the prefab of the enemy hook that we want to generate. And then you also want to make sure that the total count in the awake method is replaced. So here it should be the normal count plus the enemy count. So we want to make sure that we have 100 in total, but we have some enemies and a bunch of normal hooks, so to speak. Okay. And then we also need to make sure that we start this coroutine in our start method, but not just with normal hooks, but also with enemy hooks. Okay. So here, actually, let's replace this with ref enemy hook. And this will not be the normal hook count, but the enemy hook count. Okay, so let's put them next to each other. So like this. All right, now let's save this script and go back to Unity. And to be precise, we want to go to the hook pool controller. Okay, this one here. And now you see we have no reference for an enemy hook. So let's look at the prefabs. I have this enemy hook parent here. I'm going to drag that in there. And let's say we have a total of 20. Okay, so we have 100 normal hooks and we have 20 enemy hooks. Okay, and now it should generate those. So we have 120 in total in that case. So let's see if the size goes to 120 once we start the game. There we are. It goes all the way up to 120. Okay. So there were some enemy hooks now in our way. We could, of course, make the game more difficult if we say that we should have more enemy hooks along the way and so forth. And you can see they can be on top of each other. So that's very interesting and tricky. And we cannot hit the hooks, enemy hooks yet. So that's something that we also need to look into. Because I cannot hit the enemy hook, as you can see here. I can only hit the other hooks. And then there were two little bugs that we still need to eliminate. And that is if we go to our scripts here, to the hook pooler script. Well, that's where the magic happened, yes. But at the same time, in the game scene script, in the game over method, I added this one line where I say once the game is over, once we did all of that, I'm going to set the time scale to 0, which means I'm going to stop the game from doing anything. So freeze the game, meaning the gameplay will be freezing. Okay. So once we fall into the lava, I'm just going to freeze the game. Or what you can also, of course, do is you can reduce the time to 0.1. Actually, this is an F. Here float, you can try that, and then the game will be slowed down. And then also on top of that, the retry button and the home button don't work right now anymore once we go into the play mode. And that has to do with our gameplay panel being active. So it has this image which is now in the way, and also this image generated this gray background. So now I got rid of this image, or I turned it off. And now if we look at it, let's just test it. Let's just try to game over, boom, and we can retry. Now retry and home works, but as it seems like this slowing down, actually did I save the script? I did save the script, but for some reason it wasn't fast enough, or it didn't slow it enough. So let's slow it actually to 0, and let's test it again, and then you will see that the game just stops at that point. And we still can click retry and home and all of that, but at least the player is not falling through the lava all the way down where the other hooks are. Okay, so let's try. And ding, the game stops. Okay, so you can now retry. And now we can play. Now, of course, you can try to hit something in the lava, but usually you shouldn't be. Because as soon as you're deep enough down, well, you're already in the lava, right? So let me actually try to achieve that. And yeah, I couldn't hook something that is in the ground. Now, of course, as you can see, there are a bunch of cool features that will still be added later on. But yeah, I think we're good for now when it comes to the auto generation and the general gameplay. So you now have a real game that actually works. Even though you don't have a game over mode by hitting the red hooks, and you can't even touch the red hooks. So that's also something we need to look at. So yeah, in order to do that, in order to fix it, you need to go to your prefabs and to your hook parent. So your hook E parent, your enemy hook. And then inside of this enemy hook, what you can do is you can, or you have to, add the hook controller script and deactivate it. Now there is one more thing that you need to do, but I'm not gonna tell you what it is, because if you don't do that, something very funny happens, and I will show you what happens. So I had this very funny bug, and it's not really a bug, it's intended behavior, but it's based on what I programmed, all right? So what I set up. So let me click on one of those enemies, right? So here you can see it's dragging me around. So if I hit an enemy, that's what happens. It just drags me away, woo, and it flies around, and it's constantly somewhere else than where I am. And it generates this very funny behavior. Maybe you want that. Maybe you want exactly that. And I think that's how this game is different to the bad game. And I actually like it a lot more this way, to be honest. Because the bad game is cool, but man, it doesn't have flying enemies. And flying enemies like this is hilarious. I love it. And figuring out what the bug was, why this happened, because this is really weird behavior, wasn't so easy. But it actually has to do with the following thing. It has to do with the position of the enemy hook being by default not reset. So here, this is key. Okay, now let's reset that. Let's reset the position. And now let's run it again just to see if the enemy hook is now not flying away. Because maybe you want that. I personally liked it. But now, let's see. You can see now it's not flying away. The enemy hook is there, and I can just turn around and so forth. Okay, so that's it for this part. And by the way, in case you still can't hit the hook, maybe your layer here is incorrect or something like that, you can even have the layer here set to hook and change the children or only this object. Both will be fine. It doesn't make a difference, but maybe for some reason it doesn't work for you, then you can try it like that. All right, so that is it. I hope you enjoyed it. And in case you did, please leave a like and also consider subscribing. And by the way, this is of course not the full game. There will be a lot more coming in the future, and there will be a bunch more games that are coming, and you will also profit from that, because I will also upload the core features of those other games to YouTube. Okay, so you will definitely get that. Okay, so stay tuned, and thanks a lot for being with me for this project.